When Duchess Endova discovered the humans, she was ecstatic. After the initial misunderstandings, she realized that mankind was the tool she needed to take the throne. There were only about 12 billion of them, with only one real system. They would be easy to control. More importantly, they were good at fighting. Well, they were for the most part terrible with a sword, spear, or bare hands, but they didn't need that. They had evolved to be able to throw things with deadly accuracy, and as such were great at distance attacks. Nowadays, they didn't rely on throwing stones, but rather what could only be described as portable artillery. A well-armed and well-trained human could take out dozens of enemies without getting hurt. Not only that, but they were great at tactics too, using snipers to disrupt the chain command, forcing the enemy to fight them in disadvantageous terrain, making a show of their power to push the enemy to surrender, destroying supply lines. The more Duchess Endova learned about humans and their military history, the more she was convinced that she needed to obtain their strength. But she would need to act carefully. Even if humans were primitives, they were still more numerous than her subjects, and she had learned many reasons why an invasion would go wrong. Now, she needed another way to convince them. So, she would offer them to fight for her in exchange for technologies, rare minerals, and land. Tech and minerals would make them even stronger, and the land they'd be interested in would be around their home system. That is to say, utterly worthless. It was perfect. And after a few months of deliberation formed their citizenry, she still didn't understand the point of this system, but she was ready to ignore their eccentricities as long as they fought for her. They accepted. After that, she just had to wait for a good opportunity to strike and unleash her new mercenaries. While they were ineffective in space, they worked wonders on the ground, even better than anticipated. They were so terrifying that many nobles joined Endova's faction just to avoid facing them. And they only grew stronger every time they got their hands on a new technology. Soon, they were no longer asking for payment, just the right to reverse engineer things they looted from planets they invaded. They then used it to improve, not only their weaponry, but also their augments, a technique so insane as our scientists never even considered it. Humans were putting technological implants in their body to become stronger, faster, and more accurate. The translator chip was also an example of that. Soon, they began to develop their own fleet. Not build it, however. In fact, to make use of their ground combat superiority, they adopted boarding tactics, with the added bonus of getting to keep the ship. Once they had enough ships to transport large amounts of people and materials, they began handling their prisoners themselves, which was a relief for the Duchess, as keeping what was quickly amounting to hundreds of millions of civilians and soldiers was becoming a logistical nightmare. The humans were bringing their prisoners back to their territory, where no one really knew what happened. When asked, their ambassador simply replied that they were used to expend their economy. Endova knew enough about human history to understand what that meant. The humans even accepted prisoners from other members of the coalition as payment. Endova did feel a bit bad sending even the children in what was probably slavery, but she needed to pay the bills somehow, and the massive amounts of rare metal the humans demanded were simply not sustainable. By the time the usurper fell, nearly 3 billion Uzars had been sent to the humans. They were viewed by most of the Empire in a mixed way. On one hand, they were absolutely terrifying warriors. They had only sent 10 million soldiers as the maxus, and yet no one contested they did most of the work to bring the Empire down. On the other hand, they always sent help to the planet they conquered. They built hospitals, helped to feed the population, and generally acted very differently towards their enemy or those they viewed as innocents. This led to an interesting situation, where the planets who were the most scared of humans were those where they had never set foot. But the war was over, and its horrors behind them. Now it was time to celebrate the coronation of the new Empress with an entire month of festivities. Endova tried to enjoy it in her new position, but she couldn't but worry about her debt. The humans had become more and more expansive during the war, and she had accumulated a considerable debt to them. As Empress, she could technically declare that the debt didn't exist, but that didn't seem like the wisest move. The human General Secretary, which, as far as she understood, was their leader, requested an audience as soon as the coronation was over. The imperial coffers were empty, as both sides had spent everything in the war. She decided to wait 1 year before paying, then another, and another. After 4 years, the debt had increased significantly both from her using humans to put down many rebellious factions, and their significant interest rate. The General Secretary requested an audience. It was denied. He still came, and the Empress had no choice but to organize one. She now understood painfully that even an absolute monarch does not hold absolute power. He bowed down as low as it was expected for a commoner meeting the Empress before speaking. Your Majesty, I'm afraid the issue of your debt towards my nation cannot wait a single day longer. As much as it pains me to say, and rest assured I don't mean any disrespect, you can't pay us in money or metals anymore. You need to take a decision. And what do you want? Technology? Land? I'm afraid you no longer have technology we don't. As for land, we are not interested in imperial territory, and our law recognizes what's beyond that as up for grabs. We accepted you giving territories you didn't have before, but now it's out of the question. Then what? I'm afraid you can only pay us in power, and don't bother trying to delay the payment. Our army is already in position, and ready to assist the revolutionaries we swayed to our cause. As our citizen of the United Nations will come back to the Empire and help it transition to a constitutional monarchy. As our citizen? Who are you talking about? She had already given up the idea of stopping the humans years ago. If she was honest with herself, she had known that it would end like this since years. Well, we saved many poor souls from the imperial judiciary system during the war. Curiously, nobody in the nobility seemed to care about what happened to them. A perfect opportunity to show them how we run things and prepare them for the inevitable day of the confrontation.